the one thing everyone says, diplomats, politicians, is that Ukraine will not be allowed to run out of money. The question is, how do we get there? How do we actually ensure that, Europe is putting its money where its mouth is?
Gabriel Gavin is a European politics reporter with Politico in Brussels. He joins me now. Hi, Gabriel.
Hi there.
Let's talk about the situation in Ukraine and the freezing of the Russian assets by the European authorities. What's the latest on that?
Yeah, well, absolutely. We're heading into, I think, an unimaginably busy period now for European politics in the run up till the end of the year. And one of the biggest issues on the agenda is that the EU is under pressure to try and ensure that Ukraine doesn't run out of money by the middle of next year when its current financing begins to run out. And the plan has always been to underwrite a significant loan to Kyiv to enable it to pay for troops' salaries, military equipment, to keep paying pensions, to ensure that the economy can keep afloat, with 210 billion euros worth of immobilized Russian assets, the majority of which are kind of kept in a depository here in Belgium called Euroclear. And Belgium has long been the sole country saying, well, we're not so sure about this plan. We have some legal questions, some worries. And previous hopes of having agreed a deal, starting to send this money to Ukraine, had been dashed. Now, that's all coming to a head tomorrow when ambassadors and envoys meet. But the deal is starting to look a lot more precarious because Italy, Bulgaria, and Malta have jumped on board with this kind of counter movement, worrying about the legal implications of using this seized money to fund Ukraine, and potentially opening up a massive, massive row. If there's not a deal agreed tomorrow, European leaders are coming to town, presidents, prime ministers from all 27 member states, to try and work out what to do on Thursday. But if they can't reach an agreement, then effectively the whole thing will be cast into doubt, and we'll be ending this year without a clear sense of where Ukraine's funding is going to be coming from next year. So it's a really serious debate. And while it's a technical financial issue, it's something that matters enormously to Europeans. And I think many people will be extremely angry if we've created this uncertainty, for kind of questions of legal or financial accountability.
Yeah, I mean, please do correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought the concern from Belgium was that they might be left holding the legal baby if a court subsequently decides that releasing these assets, these Russian assets to Ukraine, is not lawful. I don't know whether that's right or wrong, but if it is the case, what are the other countries' problems with this situation?
So Belgium's had a list of demands. If you want the Belgians to support this plan, the Commission and other European countries have to make a series of guarantees. One is that, yes, absolutely, as you say, they'll be protected from having to foot, a legal bill that could be worth hundreds of, tens or hundreds of billions, and take years and years and years and require massive amounts of lawyering. They have to repay the funds and legal costs. So they want to ensure that that risk is shared between other countries, right? And at the same time, they want to ensure that if a court orders them to pay it back, there is a pool of money made available within a couple of days to be able to make good on their legal obligations, and that money isn't just lost somewhere in the system. It's not, already been deployed to Ukraine. So you need to stopgap the money you're using to underwrite the loan in the first place. So they've created a series of conditions, and what Bulgaria and Malta and Italy have been worried about is that they too will obviously now, as a result of those commitments, if and when they're given to Belgium, will be on the hook as well for these kind of commitments. And there's also a general concern about, well, does this stretch the nature of the investment treaties that the European countries have? Is there going to be a concern that if people put their money into the EU from China or Saudi Arabia or other regimes that have questionable human rights records and could have a different foreign policy trajectory when it comes to relations with Europe in the future, will their money be up for seizure? Will their money be up for being frozen and then lent out to their victims, as in the case of Ukraine? So it's a question that cuts to the heart of European politics. But the one thing everyone says, diplomats, politicians, is that Ukraine will not be allowed to run out of money. The question is, how do we get there? How do we actually ensure that Europe is putting its money where its mouth is?
Okay, aside from the cash, EU leaders are going to use a critical summit on Thursday to talk about the military capabilities that Europe has and Ukraine has. What exactly is the format of that, and what are we expecting to come out of it?
Yeah, so this is the final European Council summit of the year, and it's a huge day of political theatre for the 27 member state bloc. Leaders will come, they'll speak to the cameras for a few moments, they'll go in, they'll sit down with behind closed doors, and then that's where the negotiations really begin. And one of the things that's been quite contentious with defence is everybody wants additional defence money. Everybody wants money from the EU. Everybody wants additional kind of fiscal leeway to borrow money to put into their defence industries. Even countries like Hungary, which are really, have close ties to Russia and have opposed almost every other part of Europe's foreign policy platform, they want the money to be able to invest in their armed forces and their military industries because it's good for jobs. But what people have questions over, and even some of the bigger countries like France that have questions over, is the idea that Brussels is proposing that European countries should kind of move towards sharing joint capabilities. So instead of 27 countries producing 27 different kinds of anti-drone gun or 27 different kinds of tank or 27 different kinds of armed personnel carrier, you pool capabilities, you look at which countries can lead, which countries support, and you have a kind of shared defensive platform. And now, obviously, in the UK, this idea, the spectre of an EU army always kind of loomed large. It was never really borne out by any concrete plans. Now, actually, some countries are saying, well, look, what does this mean for us? We have our own national capabilities. We don't want to necessarily give up our own, entire sovereignty over our military capabilities. And I think that's not necessarily quite what the proposal is suggesting, but that's the impression that they're going to have to overcome to kind of move forward. And I think minds have been concentrated by the fact that you've had a string of aerial incursions, Russian fighter jets in European airspace. Lithuania has declared a state of emergency because of meteorological balloons being sent from Belarus and shutting down its airport for days at a time now. So I think there's a really pressing security situation in the EU, as well as obviously the pressing need to ensure that Ukraine can continue to defend itself.
Yeah, and the elephant in the room, of course, is America. And the US have intervened in Belarus recently, who've released over 100 prisoners. Tell me about that story.
Yeah, so 123 prisoners released today, including Maria Kolesnikava, who was one of the most prominent opposition figures detained when Belarus decided to completely hollow out its entire opposition in 2020. Obviously, a close ally of Russia, become even closer in recent years, been used as a platform for Russia's invasion into Ukraine. But President Donald Trump seems to have a soft spot for Ukraine and its strongman dictator Alexander Lukashenko. And there's always been a question of, well, can he achieve results when he deals with people like Kim Jong-un or Putin or Lukashenko? And in this case, it seems the prospect of some sanctions being relaxed has actually forced the Belarusians to give up some of their political prisoners. And they've done extraordinary things in the past to try and gain these political prisoners, preventing them from leaving the country. In one case, forcing the landing of a Ryanair passenger plane just to abduct a single dissident. So I think it is important. This is an important signal. I think it's a signal probably that Belarus knows it can't just be as opposition. It can't just rely on Russia. It's going to have to at some point, if it wants to have an economy that functions, if it wants to have industries that function, it's going to have to kind of step away from that kind of historic partnership and have some form of rapprochement with the West. I think there's a lot of people who are uneasy about the Americans, doing these kind of deals without European support, without European knowledge in many cases. I think the real question is, will this lead to some form of change in Belarus's behavior in the future?
And finally, Gabriel, you've got a story with a great headline. I wonder what's behind it. Belgium can't build a roundabout. Tell me more.
Well, I mean, this is something that elicits sighs from pretty much everyone here in the European capital. So for years now, there's been a plan to redesign the roundabout, the Schuman roundabout, at the heart of the European quarter. So sitting between the European Commission, the European Council, surrounded by, embassies, the European External Action Service. This is like the Trafalgar Square.
It's not any old roundabout.
This is the heart of European democracy, people would say, right? And there was a plan basically to kind of build a bit of concrete, have a roundabout, have maybe a little canopy, some plants. Not the world's biggest construction project. And it has rolled on and on and on and on without any clear end in sight, going millions of euros, 3 million euros over budget, to the point where people are just sick of it. I mean, you cannot move really from one side of the European quarter to the other without getting penned in through, metal barricades, etc. And the reason is obviously that Belgium has always struggled to have a government and has really very kind of difficult and contentious power sharing rules between the different linguistic minorities. And Brussels itself, the city, has not had a government now for a very long time and can't agree on how to take this forward. So now they've kind of dropped the plans, scaled them down, and it's going to be quite a flat bit of concrete, I think. And that's still taking its time. And
does it feel, sorry, Gabriel, does it feel symbolic?
I think I'll leave the symbolism to our readers and to your listeners. But at a time when Europe faces, unprecedented threats and is trying to agree on a massive expansion of powers, on, defense, on capabilities, on whatever, and gets caught up in these arguments over, between where Malta chips in and has an issue, or, where, people can't agree to put aside their national interest for just a moment and work on a collective project. The idea that, politicians in Brussels can't get their act together and build a roundabout certainly doesn't bode well. And I think a lot of people are looking to this summit just on the margins of this roundabout, actually, on Thursday to try and prove them wrong.
Gabriel, great to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed. Gabriel Gavin is European politics reporter with Politico, based in Brussels.